All right, well, why don't we get started? Lots to discuss. For our top news, it's about how AI is reinventing what computers are. In technology, Hertz has ordered 100,000 Teslas to electrify their rental fleet following bankruptcy. In the environment, apparently a successful COP26 is essential for Earth's future. So here's what has to go right. Under materials, digital denim is a pretty good match for the real thing, some experts say, even if you have to stitch it up. Now in space, Bezos' Blue Origin announces plans for a private space station. What do you think of that? And this is interesting. In biology, after using tools, crows are happier and behave more optimistically with the pleasure of accomplishment. And Richard says, well, how do you measure how optimistic crows are? And for the brain, when and why did human brains decrease in size some 3,000 years ago? Ants may hold clues, but did our brains decrease because of the value of social interactions and learning with the expansion of collective intelligence in human societies, or something else? Anyway, when and how did that happen? And for our last story, infrared light therapy might aid dementia patients. So that's what we have. And Richard, tell us about the main story, how AI is reinventing what computers are.
Well, every year, Apple and Samsung and Google roll out new products and have new releases. And, it happens so regularly, we don't think much about it anymore. But now, if you look behind all this marketing glitz, there's something remarkable that actually is going on in the background. One example is the latest hardware offering from Google, their new Pixel 6 phone. And it's the first phone to have a separate chip for AI. And the chip that runs the iPhone has a part of the main CPU chip that is called neural engine, and it's designed to run AI. So AI chips are now coming in the phones, our telephones, and this is a kind of thing that we don't notice, but now it's an example how AI is becoming a part of our everyday life. And it turns out it will end up changing the way we think about computers and the kind of things we do with computers. So if you look at it, computers haven't changed much in 40 or 50 years since they started to use chips for their memory instead of magnetic core. They're just smaller and faster, but they still are processors that carry out instructions, and as they get better, they get faster at doing the same thing. And AI is changing this on at least 3 fronts. The first is how computers are made. The second is how they're programmed. And the third is how they're used. And so ultimately, it's going to change what computers are for. And presently, the core of computing has been based on, again, just doing simple or complex calculations, and as computers get better, they get faster. But now the core of computers are changing from number crunching to decision making, and that's a big change. The first change affects the way that computers are made and the chips that drive them. Traditional computer gains, as I've said, have gained their power by becoming faster at doing what they do. And uh, but now these AI applications work in a different way and require a different approach. They have to perform a large number of calculations at the same time, but the calculations don't have to be so precise. And so to do it, they needed to use a different kind of chip than the kind of microprocessors that run our PCs. When AI started up about 10 years ago, the chips they used for processors were mainly specialized graphic processor units, GPUs, and they used those because they were designed to use a smaller bit, a smaller word size, a smaller unit, a less precise unit, but use them really fast. So you could, which is exactly what they needed to do for AI. And now chip makers are developing hardware specifically for AI. And of course, Google and Facebook are spending enormous amounts of money on AI. And uh, as example, the chip in the Google phone, the Pixel 6, is got a new mobile version of Google's Tensor processing unit, a TPU, which is specialized for AI. And TPUs are designed for this high process, low precision computations that are needed by neural networks. And these TPUs are in your phones because one of the applications they're used for is for photo recognition and facial recognition, visual recognition, and they're also used for natural language search queries. So they're used in language processing. And then uh, Google has been making TPUs for several years now, and these Google chips actually are becoming the standard around the world in data centers. Because again, there's so much of the processing now that is visual image processing and voice processing. So then uh, last year, Google used their AI to design the layout of their new TPU. So they had AI designing the next generation of chips. And I've seen the difference in the layout. And if these kind of chips are laid out by humans, things tend to be in blocks in orderly rows because that's what the IC designers, that's how they think about things. And they're orderly thinking kind of guys, otherwise they wouldn't be chip designers. And the AI laid it out entirely different. Things are not organized in these same blocks. They're just located where it makes the most sense to put them. And it turns out these chips that are designed by the AI turn out to be better and more efficient than can be done by the humans. So already we have last year AI developing the next generation of chips for AI. So you have the computers making themselves smarter with each generation. So that might be kind of a significant element in itself. The next way with chips has to do with programming, the way that computers are told what to do. The way we've been operating since the beginning of computers is computers are programmed with very specific instructions as to what the inputs are and the outputs are and how you process things. And so every little detail has to be worked out for the program to work. And it turns out that gave them tremendous problems in language recognition. When I worked at IBM in the 1960s, they had a big research lab in San Jose. And while I was there, IBM, who had spent millions of dollars researching language program, gave up the effort. They just said, it's too hard. We can't do it. We're not going to spend more money on it. So that's the problem dealing with language when you have to program in all of these complex rules that language involves. But now with machine language, these language processing AIs are not trained. They don't have to get rules by the programmer. Instead, they create a neural network that learns the rules for itself. And it's fundamentally a very different way to operate. And this change is at the base of pretty much all the technology that we depend on now for our everyday life. And this is a sign of the changes that are coming.
Any thoughts?
Oh, I think it's a little scary. I wonder computers one of these days might outsmart us, and we can't control them any longer.
Yes, that's a problem.
Yeah,
Well, they do say that AI is enough different than human decision making that that's more likely to just become a tool that complements the way people make decisions. People make decisions based on emotional judgments, and until they can equip computers with emotions, they won't make decisions the same way people do.
And one of the things we will see when we look back in history 1,000 years from now, assuming there is a human race and a history and stuff, is that it took us a while to figure out AI and how to be able to actually do it. And what you're seeing now are just the first early halting steps.
Well, the danger too is that we're letting this technology paint us into a corner where we're so dependent on it that we can't function without it. It
Right.
would be
Yes.
the same. You could argue that steel is the same way. We depend on steel so much that we couldn't function without it. But we don't have to send our knives and axes back to the manufacturer once a week to get them updated.
Yep.
I think if we took all the tools that were available, we would be miserable. I mean, we are depending on technology.
That's right. We've depended on hammers ever since we've had hammers.
Well, Richard, tell us about Teslas and Hertz ordering a bunch of them for its rental fleet.
Well, if you haven't already bought Tesla stock, then I don't know if it's too late or not. But now, Hertz has had a lot of business troubles, and they are just coming out of reorganization for going into bankruptcy. And they are have to do something, I guess, to continue their business. And they announced the biggest order ever, 10,000 vehicles from Tesla. So these are going to be Tesla Model 3. So this is the high-end good Tesla. They also, part of the deal includes access for all their rental cars to Tesla's supercharger network, which is pretty extensive. And Hertz is going to start putting in their own EV charging networks as well. So they're going all in. And the Hertz is saying the 100,000 order is only their initial order. So they are talking like they're going to go into this big time. And Hertz also is saying, in a marketing way, I recognize as a ex-marketing guy, they're saying their new outlook will focus not only on rental vehicles, but chart a new course for the travel, mobility, and the auto industry. And they're going to build a modern mobility ecosystem. Those are a lot of fancy words. I have no idea what that actually means, but it gives them something to write about in their press release. And they say now electric vehicles are mainstream, and Hertz is going to lead the way as a mobility company. And maybe the mobility company means that they plan to use the auto driving resources, so you could just phone up Hertz and your EV would automatically drive to your door and pick you up. Wouldn't that be cool? Anyway, so Hertz is going to lead the way, and the 100,000 EVs deliveries will start next month and go through the end of 2022. It's going to take so long because, Tesla just makes a couple of 100,000 a quarter now, so their production rates are not up. And so 100,000 EVs is a big buy. It also, I think, kind of locks out Tesla purchases in the near term from Hertz competitors, because Tesla doesn't have any leftover manufacturing capacity. So anyway, the world is changing. I thought with these wonderful EVs, I'm never going to be able to drive one, but now maybe the next time I go to US, I can rent one from Hertz.
Any thoughts?
I thought that was a wonderful idea, and I thought this was going to get a lot of new people driving EVs, and it was going to be great. And then I clicked through from the article to the review of the Model 3. And I read somebody's review of that, and I found out how difficult it is, one, to even get into the car when you first get it, and then how difficult it is to drive it and so on. And I thought, I'm not sure that, as a consumer, I would want to rent from Hertz and get one of these new things in an unknown environment. So that might not work out so well. But in the other thing, for Hertz itself, it seems to me that it's just going to require more staff time on their part to orient the customer to the vehicles. And, it's hard to get staff these days anyway. So, and when was the last time you actually rented a car? They don't go out to the car with you anymore and teach you anything. They just hand you the keys, and there's no key to hand you. So I don't know how it's going to work in practice. I'm not sure I would do it.
Mm-hmm. It's still, the thing about EVs is it's still early in the life of the EVs, and the Tesla Model 3, as successful as they've been, are almost like the Model A of EVs. And there are going to be a lot of changes that happen dramatically in the next few years. But Hertz is still, I think, again, as a marketing guy, I admire what they're doing. They're making a statement. They're saying, welcome, this is the future. Come to Hertz and get the future. And I think that's a good pitch to make as a marketing guy.
Suzanne, I was
We're gonna have
wondering,
to-
my son has a Tesla 3, and I had no difficulty getting into it. I wonder what that story is.
Well, maybe part of the story, I think I've heard secondhand that one of the things that is good about the Tesla is that it recognizes individual people and makes adjustments to things like seats and mirrors and things like that that are just for you. And I don't know how it knows you, but that's another question. So if you're a new person getting into it, that would mean that nothing is adjusted to you and you have to figure out how to do it.
They're gonna have to build a lot of charging stations nationwide.
Right.
Because the range of the Tesla 3 is 315 miles. So it's gonna be somewhat limited if you don't have a charging station once you run out of charge.
Right. But anyway, that's merely an infrastructure problem. And again, we're at the first few percent of adoptions of these EVs in America. And that stuff is going to be built out fast. And, it'll be better next year than it is this year. And this year you can still survive. You just have to plan out your trip for across country to where there are charging stations, but they're pretty available, I think.
The other thing
What do
is
I know?
the price sounds high at $139 a day, but maybe their target market is the corporate world, and so many companies want to promote their green flavor and their reduced carbon footprint that it'll be corporations that have their people using these cars. Because I know right now, most of us don't rent from Hertz because they're more expensive than the other people.
Absolutely. The only time I rented from Hertz was when I had an expense account.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I usually didn't rent from them because they were too slow.
So Richard, moving on from electric vehicles to the conference to solve everything on the environment, COP26, why do we think it's essential for Earth's future, and what has to go right about it?
Well, the reason we think it's essential is because we've been going in the wrong way. That one of the things we're saying now is we did a wonderful job in the Paris conference to be able to get people in the world to start stepping up and making some climate goals. And so at least we made a start then. The problem is that now we know better, and the goals that we set won't work to keep us from even worse problems. And also, by the way, no country in the world is ahead of their plan to solve the climate crisis. And in fact, pretty much most countries are behind their commitments. And so one of the things that's happened with these international conferences in the last 25 years is they have been a place in the world that has set the discussion and set standards and set something of a worldwide plans and goals that can be measured against. That's why we can say we're behind what we had committed to in Paris, because we had made plans in Paris, and so we can measure them. And so this is the next round of that. And right now, they say the stakes could not be higher. And the reason they say that is that unless in the next 10 years we do something to what I think of as bend the curve, and the curve being the curve of how much CO2 we're putting in the atmosphere, unless we can bend that curve down in the next 10 years, we're going to see not 1.5 degrees C heating by the end of this century. They say how we're operating now will be 2.7 degrees C higher. And if you think 1.5 is bad, wait till you see 2.7. So, we are in a place where countries have pledged actions to reach zero emissions, and around the world, renewable energy is booming, and it seems like the tide is turning against fossil fuels, and the economic costs of not acting are becoming clearer. For example, in the US, they say right now, the US is spending $2 billion a month on climate disasters. So those kind of bills kind of add up pretty fast. And, the problem with all of this is they're getting 200 countries together, and they're acting by consensus. And it's hard to get all of these different countries to line up together. And the pressing issue with that is for all countries, domestic policies are what drive international negotiations. So while it's a climate change for the world, each country comes there with their particular needs and desires for their own country. And, somehow they have to work something out, and it has to be, you have to have a common enough view of the problem to have agreement as to the solution. Anyway, so in COP26, they're going to end up doing several things that are critical. One is to look at how well nations have been implementing their commitments, and then to the extent to which they're willing to increase their ambitions. That is the critical element within all of this. And then there are other issues that are also important that include the climate finances from the rich countries, who environmentalists say are the ones that put all this crap in the atmosphere to begin with. The financial assistance they're going to give to the developing world on what they have to contribute to solve it. Then there are issues of adaptation to climate change and carbon trading rules that have to be put in place. And so those are the things that we have to deal with. And again, it's critical right now because countries have to not simply commit to net zero targets by 2050, but they have to set stronger targets for 2030. So we need countries around the world to decide that they are going to actually act, not just make plans, but do something, and do something in the next 10 years. That is a real short time for this kind of actions. And if they don't do it by 2030, there is zero chance, they say now, that the world will hold the rise in global temperatures to 2 degrees C. So You know, there are good things happening. Biden is trying to do things from the US, and the US is actually trying to lead. And I think that that is good in the current environment. We need some leader. Certainly, China is not going to be the leader. Russia is not going to be the leader. And I'm glad that Biden is trying to stand up. We wish the Congress were behind him in this, but we'll see on that. And I do have to say there's some good news that's happening out of COP26 right now. They've already, there is an agreement to halt deforestation around the world by 2030. So that is a new agreement, and it absolutely is positive and is the kind of things we need to see in the world. So good luck for the next 2 weeks, guys.
Any thoughts?
Well, one thing that people should realize is that they've had 25 of these previous meetings, and like Richard says, no one is meeting their targets. They all agree to do things, but realistically, it's just not possible. So all these meetings are as a pulpit for politicians to stand up and kind of pretend that they're leading. And when the IPCC asked for that special study on the impact of a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, they came back with all these catastrophes, everything from crop failures and weather changes and starvation and on and on. But they never mentioned the real problem, and that's going to be the mass migration of people from the tropics to Western Europe and North America. And when that happens, that's going to be a real political challenge of how we deal with that inevitability.
Have enough 300 million climate migrants might be a problem, you say?
I think so, yeah.
Richard, I was interested today in listening to a few YouTube things of Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
And she was saying, all you people go is blah, 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 and nothing happens. Normally, I'm somewhat impressed by the Canadian Prime Minister, Trudeau, but he's one of the key examples of blah, blah, blah. He makes a very good statement that's very impressive. And then our emissions go up. He says we'll do everything around climate change, and then we purchase pipelines for fossil fuels. And at the COP conference, you mentioned neither Russia nor China are there. And how we can be optimistic about this when certainly we'll do an awful lot of blah, blah, blah. And I'm a little bit worried about whether there will be anything else.
Well, again, certainly there are lots of skeptics, as we see here. And if there is this much skepticism here in our Zoom session with half a dozen people, imagine what it's like in the world. So, but still, with this, Paris changed the discussion and the standards, and there have been actions that have come from the Paris conference, and those actions are in the right way. They're just not fast enough. And I think certainly these conferences like this continue that discussion. They increase standards, they increase commitment, and they increase the political turmoil when this stuff continues to be a problem. So I see it as a necessary and useful component, even though we're behind what we said last time.
There's a good show on Netflix right now, a documentary called Kiss the Soil. And it says that,
Oh, yes, I've seen that one.
yeah, the soil is capable of holding something like 3 or 4 times as much carbon as there is in the entire atmosphere. And
Right.
our agricultural industrial agriculture ruins the soil's capability to
Yes.
retain carbon. And
Yes.
that what we really need to do is focus on changing agricultural practices.
Yes.
It's
While we
really
were
worth a
in
watch.
India, Carol went to training for a particular kind of program in India that was really based on the idea that to grow good crops, you have to make good soil. So this is the idea exactly that you're talking about, Andrew. So it's not a new idea, but it sure is hard to change farmers' minds about how to do what they have been doing for their whole life. And many of them have been doing after their father did it as well. So it's a tough change.
And it is really important. And maybe one of the most exciting things is the whole thing around regenerative agriculture.
Oh, yes.
But the West has done so much to prevent that. Our thing of making on seeds and making them more productive is just the opposite of making the soil more productive.
Right, exactly. But it makes lots of money for Monsanto.
Yeah.
And yet this isn't an agenda item on the COP26 program.
Well, oops. Again, I think all of this shows what a tremendous problem it is, even addressing the breadth of the issues. I bet there's not much on the COP program about the long-term warming of the oceans and the changing of the ocean climates and how that's going to affect the climate of the world. For example, that might be a good subject.
So, Richard, if we want to move on, what's this about digital denim?
Well, I finally got a material story that I know I could get some people relating to. And digital denim is just one more use for 3D printing. And so what they did, these were researchers from North Carolina State University, and they tried printing ink onto cotton fabric to make it look like denim fabric. And, you know, nowadays the jeans that you get are pre-washed and faded and distressed and all of this stuff. These are different patterns that the denim manufacturers create in their cloth by dyeing and washing and processing in a lot of other ways. And it uses, the way they make denim now uses a lot of water and other material, and actually is pretty expensive. And the people in the fabric business are trying to figure out ways that they can operate that use fewer resources. And it turns out that with denim, if you can print it instead of making it in the conventional dyeing and then distressing cycle, you can make it using a lot less energy. It also turns out you can make the denim in shorter production runs which is important because nowadays in the fashion market, people want to have lots of different choices. And this means making things with lots of different materials, and it means shorter production runs on the materials. So if you're printing instead of making it in the conventional way, then you can just print what you need at the time, and it's much simpler. It also turns out that you can have a lot more variation in color. And I think this is going to be one of the things that makes this technology accelerate because of people's desire for colorful, stylish clothes. And you can make denim in this process of hundreds of different colors of denim. So you can have the rainbow in your jeans. And this meets the consumer demand for a lot of variety. It also means that you can make manufacturing processes that are simpler and have fewer steps and end up being faster to operate. And they are also now talking about this. There is a lot of fabric dyeing going on in the world, and certainly the fabric dyeing that they did in India 2,000 years ago with cotton almost bankrupted the Roman industry, because all the Roman gold ended up in India, where they're using it to buy printed cotton. But besides denim, there is this whole enormous cotton printed cloth industry. And what if for all of it, you could just get rid of the dyers altogether and just get your rolls of white fabric, run it through the printer, and if you needed to, you could have 5 yards of this pattern and 8 yards of that pattern and whatever you needed to sew up today. So it looks like this is another case where new high-tech change can happen to an old industry, and this change will make things enormously different in the apparel and fabric industries.
Any thoughts?
I think this is a good story, and I think it'll happen. And I think it's great that they'll be able to produce denim in a way that uses fewer resources. But I have to admit that the first image that comes to my mind is the emperor's new clothes.
Well, we know at least they'll have a good dye job. What I first thought when I read the story, and it was not the way the story turned out to be, is first I thought they would be printing the cloth itself. And I haven't read anyone who can do this. If you could print the cloth itself, then I would just imagine, when you're making an outfit, when you're doing it, the first thing you do is cut the cloth, right? And what if you don't have to cut it? If you could just make the cloth, you could print it the exact size you need before you sew them together. That would make things cool.
Actually, Richard, I was thinking similar. If the customer could go in a room and be scanned for size, and then you print the cloth, and while he does some more shopping, they make whatever he needs and walks out with this printed piece of cloth.
Hey, I think that's cool. Integrated. Well, it wouldn't be the printed piece of cloth. What you need is the guy comes into the shop, is measured by their handy dandy laser measurer. So you have automated, no hand. So it gets the thing sized for him perfectly, then he looks in the online catalog where they have his image and they're projecting the clothes onto his or her image, so they see what they'll look like in their new outfit. They say, I like that. And then they press the button and do another set of shopping, and then they come back and the new fresh clothes are made on the spot for them.
Think about how it could reduce the inventory.
Oh, I do. Since I started off in manufacturing, I appreciate process and inventory and things like that more than a lot of people. So I spent 15 years planning in process inventory, if you will, to be adequate to support what you needed to make at the end.
They have been doing something similar in the shopping malls for the last 10 years. When you go and you buy a T-shirt and get a particular image or logo printed on that T-shirt as a one-off deal.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
And some bakeries, they'll give you a birthday cake and you can give them a photo and they'll 3D print the image on the birthday cake in colored icing.
All right. Now that's really, to me, these stories show the power of what some people call additive manufacturing. And I think, for example, I wonder what this is going to mean with the whole spare parts industry. You know, if you have an old refrigerator, you have to go to some specialized appliance component shop who has the parts for the Kelvinator from 50 years ago. And so you can buy the thing you need to keep your appliance going. But what if instead of having to have all of this crap in stock, they just print you one out?
Well, and museums are already doing this when they have a broken part on a particular machine.
Okay.
They can use a laser scanning device to 3D scan the part and create a CNC file and then send the file to a 3D printer to make.
Right, and it
the
can
output.
fit, it fits exactly because it's made exactly to do it. Now, I also had heard that on the space station, they have a 3D printer that's used to make spare parts. Because certainly the space station would be a problem keeping inventory.
Yeah, they say that. Whether they really do that, I don't know.
I don't know either.
So Richard, talking about space stations, what's this private space station that Bezos is announcing plans for?
Well, Bezos originally got in the Blue Origin business 20 years ago in 2000. And he founded it with the idea one day of building space colonies in space with artificial gravity, where millions of people could live and work, and freeing Earth from the pollution of the manufacturing process. So this actually, if you look at it from his grand view, is a step in that direction. So he has announced his space station that he's calling Orbital Reef, and it will be up. The date is not clear for me, but it's sometime in this decade. And it's going to be a mixed use business park in space that supports microgravity research and manufacturing. And it's going to be a little smaller than the current ISS, but it will have room for 10 people. And I think some marketing guy was involved because also one of the things it features is giant windows to look out of the space station into space and at the Earth. So it's got big windows to look out. And again, this is not being built as a condominium or a hotel. This is being built as a commercial venture to essentially rent out specialized low gravity research and manufacturing space. And this is actually only one of several private space stations that are planned in the next year. NASA has a deal with a company, Axiom, that I never heard of, to deliver a space station that will start off docking with the ISS and later becoming a free-flying ship. And then there's another organization, NanoRacks, which is working with Voyager Space and Lockheed Martin, and they have a space station that's planned, they say, to be operational in 2027, known as Starlab. And there's some other guy, I don't remember who's going to put some condominium rental place where you can have a timeshare orbital suite. So the private space exploitation is going on now, and Bezos is gonna jump on the orbiting platform. But what he's doing is still, I think, part of a long-term plan that is a real big plan, and that's a plan to be able to move manufacturing into space.
Any thoughts?
It sounds like Amazon PR just trying to catch up to Elon Musk and his SpaceX stuff.
Oh, it certainly could look that way. But again, since Bezos founded this thing 20 years ago with this basic overall mission, then what he's doing is also consistent with what he said to start with.
Well, he started before Elon Musk and SpaceX, and
Right.
Bezos still hasn't got a rocket that can put things into orbit.
I know. Well, these guys, which billionaire are you going to trust?
Well, Richard, if you don't think Bezos or Andrew says is very happy, how is it that crows get happier? And
well, it turns out,
duels. Well, what is this?
well, it's no secret that crows are smart. And one of the things more telling, perhaps, is that crows are one of the few animals known to make tools. And what they found out is perhaps surprising is that tools make crows happy. And so what I was interested in here is how they know that. We know for people, for example, using tools, solving problems, even doing a crossword puzzle makes people happy, and people get satisfaction from doing things they're good at. And this research says that this tool use happiness is perhaps not limited to people. Now, they did this work with a kind of crow, New Caledonian crow, that already stands out because they make multiple complex tools and they continue to refine their tools to make them better. And one of the things that they know about animals now is that animals are not like machines. Animals have feelings too, and animals have emotional reactions and moods. And it turns out one of these emotions looks like it's the pleasure of accomplishment. And so uh, to get down to the scientific tests for optimism in crows, this is how they did it. The crows were trained using a small box. And when the box was placed on the left side of the table, it always contained a large reward, 3 pieces of meat. When it was on the right side, it had just a scrap of meat, a crummy reward. And then the crows quickly understood the difference. And once they did understand the difference, then the researchers placed a box in the middle of the table to see how quickly the crows would react. And their theory was that if the crow came quickly to investigate the ambiguous box, it suggested that they were optimistic. And if they waited or didn't visit the box, it suggested they were more pessimistic. And then once they had their box experiment set up, they tried different experiments with the crows, and they would give them, for example, experiments with tool use, and have a control group that had no experiment with tool use, or an unsatisfying experience with tool use. That is, something that they couldn't succeed at and accomplish what they're trying to do. And they found that the crows that had gone through and used the tool use, or had a good experience using a stressful test as compared to the easy test, those crows then went to the ambiguous box much faster than the crows who had unhappy tool use experiences. And so they conclude from this study that animals have a better mood if you give them complex, fun tasks to do. And they saw that with crows. I suspect the same thing is true for people. How about you?
Any thoughts?
Well, it's been many days since I went after meat in a box.
Well, Richard, what's this about human brains decreasing in size some 3,000 years ago? Well, how do we know that? And how did it happen?
Well, they've been studying the human brain and its evolution for some time now. And this study showed that something happened about 3,000 years ago that reduced the Homo sapien brain size. And I think they know that through the skulls that the brains were in. And so a smaller brain cavity means a smaller brain. Now, we've known for some times that Homo sapiens have a smaller brain than Neanderthals, and that was not involved in this experiment, but maybe it still shows the same kind of principle. And so they were trying to figure out what in the heck happened about 3,000 years ago to human beings that caused this reduction in brain size. And the scientists who were studying this looked around the animal kingdom, and one of the things that they looked at was ant brain size. And I don't know why, if you're trying to figure out humans, you would look at ants, but I guess they were just looking every place they could. And it turns out to be well known that ants, depending upon their environment and culture, the same kind of ant may have a bigger brain or a small brain. And it turns out ants who have been able in that colony to specialize more into individual tasks. So cooperating together, all of the ants still do everything ants need to do to survive, but an individual ant has specialized skills, so he doesn't need to know how to do everything. Once ants have a culture in which they can specialize, then it turns out their brains got smaller. And it turns out the brain, while it has all this useful stuff, is an energy hog. And brains use a lot of energy. And that is a real life issue to support the brain. And it turns out smaller brains use less energy. So there actually is an advantage in having a brain that's big enough to do what you have to do, but not too big, because that's going to use more energy. And so anyway, about 3,000 years ago was a place where the agricultural revolution had been going on now for 7,000 years, and people around the world were starting to live in bigger groups and bigger societies, with the society taking on more of the life issues that had to be dealt with by each individual in earlier generations. And they think that this cultural change, where we are more able to depend on each other to do what we need to do to live each day, then our being able to rely on our society better means we didn't have to rely on ourselves as much. And that meant we could get by with a smaller, more efficient brain, like we have now.
Any thoughts?
One of the things that this is a relatively short time in an evolutionary sense.
No shit.
And one of the things they found is that with the onset of organized agriculture, the human physique has gotten smaller from the hunter-gatherers. And they attribute that to the poorer diet of agricultural people with the reduced protein and more carbohydrates. And so it's likely or possible that the smaller brains are a result of nutrition rather than evolution.
Could be.
And the researchers do say it's a hypothesis. It's not a proven.
Right.
But the agricultural revolution seems to have been some ways earlier than 3,000 years.
Right. That was 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe it takes a while. If there are physical changes that happen, those physical changes don't happen in one generation. They
Yeah.
happen over time. And so it would make sense that it takes a while to have the change in average physique due to
Yeah.
the change in average diet. The other, yeah, anyway, interesting.
So Richard, in terms of our last thing, what's this about infrared light to get rid of the dementia that we're all getting?
Well, all you have to do is put on one of these cute, attractive hats and wear it twice a day, 6 minutes each time. And I imagine that because you're wearing it like that, you can wear it in a stationary position, so you can probably plug it in and it doesn't have to have its own battery. So you have this cute, attractive, stylish chapeau, and this emits a specific wavelength of infrared light, and the studies so far show that it improves the memory, motor functioning, and processing skills for healthy people with normal intellectual function for its age. So Fred, if you get one of these hats, it can make you even better. And this is called, this is another tongue twister. It's a transcranial photobiomodulation therapy. We're going to call it a PBMT. And they have tested this in a pilot study, and the results of the test were promising. And these were 6 minutes of PBMT twice a day for 4 weeks. And even after that short period, the researchers found significant improvement in motor function, memory performance, and brain processing speed. And so they have shown what appears to be real improvement in memory and other neurological processes for healthy people when their brains are exposed to this PBMT. And they also have done some studies with people with dementia and have found that, for example, in one test, people who went through a few weeks of this had a 20% improvement in their dementia. I don't know what 20% improvement in what, and I don't have any idea how they do that kind of measurement and can say it, but it looks like it's fairly significant. And the thing is that it was a rapid positive effect, and they tested it with mild to moderate dementia, and it seemed like it had a real positive effect. Right now, the issue, though, is this is not made in volume production, and those stylish hats cost more than 7,000 pounds to buy. So I don't think many people lakeside are going to afford their own infrared hats. Maybe we have to get together and do it on a co-op basis. And if you only need 12 minutes a day, then that means that hat could serve a pretty significant population in if you just share it. What I think is we need, does anybody have a son who is a designer? Because we have to be able to do better than that, folks. You know, if you look at that, that's a hat with a bunch of LEDs in it, and there's no reason that that ought to cost $7,000. So we just need to get one of our kids or grandkids to make a more updated version of it. He can sell a lot of them. It can pay for your retirement when he's through making all his money. So I just need you to get out there and get your kids to start developing the product for our generation.
Any thoughts?
Yes, Richard, they were in the story, they also talked about a woman who, after not using it anymore, her
Right.
memory began to fail. And the other thing is, if this was used like in nursing homes, where they can use it for several patients, this might be a great thing.
Right. Absolutely. I also read that thing about the woman deteriorating after not using it. That's why I thought we needed to make a cheap one so you could just buy one and have it at home.
Well, I think too, if you get one in a HEHIC, when you're at one of your meetings, it'll lend a new meaning to passing the hat.
Yes. Yes. Oh, hey, maybe we could have the Unitarian Fellowship buy one, and then at the services, everybody could get their brain zapped.
We just should hope that the New Caledonian Crows don't get a hold of these things. Or
Oh, I hope so.
Well, and I think we can have a denim cover made for the top of it. Right?
I think you're right.
But seriously, it was really notable in the article too, and this is really wonderful, that there were no side effects, no adverse side effects to
Yes.
this. And that was really fantastic.
Yes, it made me want one. That's why I want to have somebody make a new one. I don't have any kids who are designers. So,
Richard, I'm wondering about the wavelengths. It says infrared light therapy, but there's no such thing as infrared light therapy. There's near and there's far and this.
anyway, they know and it was a wavelength between 1060 to 1080 nanometers.
Yeah, like I have an infrared sauna blanket.
Right.
And it looks like a sleeping bag, but it's infrared light. But I don't think it has any of these magical things.
No, it doesn't have the right frequency.
With it, all it does is really heat it up. So you get the benefits of a sauna.
Right.
You don't get the benefits of these, but Heidi McLennan has a different one, which is red light therapy. And
Right.
that's not infrared. And they say all kinds of great things about it. And so I'm wondering about these different wavelengths. We know that the sun is very, very healthy for you. And the question is, which ones are useful for what? And it'll be interested in getting more stuff on this because Eric, for example, has a sauna that he goes inside of that it has the full spectrum light. Whereas mine only has a certain part of it.
And certainly I know what you're talking about, and I have not seen any kind of research yet that characterizes the different benefits of different wavelengths of light for different situations. And this is another area that is new, and we just have some episodic stuff and we have no organized understanding yet. If only we had somebody involved from the academic community here who could get researchers involved. Fred, do you know any researchers? So we could have academics involved to understand what part of the frequency spectrum, and then we need to have at least one EE involved so he could design the little thing, and then we need some snazzy marketing packaging guy or person so they can design something that people want to wear on their heads.
Don't forget about digital denim.
That's right. Well, maybe we can just have the whole thing printed by a 3D printer. I don't know if that 3D printers can print UV LEDs yet, but why not?
Richard, when you get your hat, we want you to wear it in hot science.
Okay, I will. I'm ready. I know where I'll plug it in and everything.
Well, thanks a lot, Richard, for today. Thanks everybody for participating, and we'll see you again next week. Bye
Yeah,
for now.
thank you.
Okay, interesting.